Om Namah Shivaya, Arsonist Fire, also known as Mahayogi, here on Mahayogi YouTube channel. We are going to talk about a very interesting subject. The greatest misconceptions I had earlier in my spiritual journey. I don't know if I should attribute this misconception to the ones that initiated me on the spiritual path. Anyway, with that being said, I'm going to talk about the importance of the ego. Mahayogi is a channel where we discuss spiritual topics, esoteric knowledge from the Western esoteric practice of spirituality, and occult wisdom across the Oriental traditions. To make sure that you get this, subscribe and like the video to ensure that the algorithm suggests it to you in the future. Let's go back in time, from time immemorial. I just want to refer back to the time of when the greatest masters used to live in Egypt. Let's go back to one particular master whom is known to you as Tahuti, also known as Hermes Trismegistus, popularly known as Thoth in the Western esoteric tradition, or in the Hermetic traditions. Tahuti teaches us in the 7 Hermetic principles about the principle of polarity. The principle of polarity embodies the fact that there is 2 sides to one thing, and that 2 sides are in actuality different degrees of one thing. One thing being what? Frequency, being vibration, being creation, even before creation. So let us try to find a reconciliation of the 2 extremes of polarity. Before there was creation, there was darkness, and then meaning darkness is infinite potential, or rather non-existence, or rather uncreation. Out of darkness came the light. This is when creation began. Darkness was on its own is a polar force which has attributes of condensation, which has attributes of contraction, which has attributes of a destructive or chaotic nature. And then we have what we also call light. Light has qualities of expansion, warmth, growth, evolution, and vitality, also movement. So darkness and light are in actuality two poles. They are polar opposites. You understand? So why do I want to refer to this before talking about the ego? This principle exists on every plane of existence. Remember when I told you in a previous live video that polarity exists on every plane, whether in the spiritual planes you'd find the feminine and the masculine, or the positive and the negative. Whether you are on this earthly plane, you will find the positive and the negative. Greetings, Danica. Nice to have you. Please make sure that if you are new, you subscribe to get notifications on future uploads. So even on the higher planes, we have this law which exists, which is polarity. There's opposite poles of every aspect in nature, even before nature, before existence. So I am from South Africa, Euro-African. I'm from South Africa. So there's these two polar opposites existing everywhere in nature, even before creation became visible. All right. So even in us, the principle says, another principle of one of the 7 Hermetic principles is the principle of correspondence. Whatever you see here on the earthly plane is what exists in the heavenly planes. As above, so below. This embodies the fact that there's a correspondence on every plane. So we are in actuality a mirror or a copy of creation in its larger scale. As it is said in the Bible, we were created in the image of God. So it is thus we are in actuality a representation of God. As above, so below. So we also are a representation of the universe and everything else in nature. Within our cosmic makeup, we also have the elements. Elements simply means what is fundamental to our nature, meaning the building blocks of our nature. And then inside the building blocks of our nature, we have also two polar opposites, which are water and fire, which can be reconciled into the darkness and light theory, which can be reconciled into polar opposites and the principle of polarity. Now, we have this polarity going on even inside us. There's a portion in our body which is responsible for fire and digestion. There's a portion in our body which is responsible for cold and contraction or dissolution, meaning dissolving. And it contains a large part of water, and there's a part in our body that contains a large part of fire. So we have these two polar opposites existing in us. Even on the highest planes of our makeup, one of the highest planes of our creation or makeup is that which we call the mental plane. Even in our mind, we have this principle playing out, the principle of polarity, where we have the feminine and the masculine mind, the negative and the positive mind. So now, let us go into our topic about the ego. We have also what we call the conscious and the unconscious mind. We have also what we call the higher self and the lower self. So the lower self is said to be grounding, is said to be logical, is said to be limited in view, is said to be of an egotistical nature, is said to be prideful, is said to be survival, instinctive, and all of them qualities where them attribute to the lower self, while the higher self is the polar opposite of that. Now, in the beginning of my journey, I used to listen to my gurus, one of which was Bobby Hemmitt. So Bobby Hemmitt, shout out to Bobby Hemmitt, wherever he is. I'm not a medium, guys. So if I announce maybe as though he's alive, please don't judge me. And also if I announce as though maybe he's not alive, please don't judge me. I'm not a medium. So one of the things that Bobby Hemmitt teaches us is to kill the ego, or to try and subjugate the ego. This is where you get practices like not chasing materialism or material prosperity. This is where you get practices like immersing yourself into situations where it shocks your ego or your lower self. For example, challenging the conventional or the traditional norms and going against the norms. I am a living testament and proof of that, because in everything I do, or in every knowledge that I learn, I try my best to apply. So I am also one of the scholars of that teaching. I've had instances where I did not bad stuff, because there's no good and bad, where I did unconventional practices in order to try and shock this ego and to try and kill this ego and find myself subjugating this ego. For quite a while, I even grew dreadlocks. As you can see from my previous videos, I grew dreadlocks because I thought growing dreadlocks and applying holy ash, just like the Aghoras would allow me to subjugate or have control over the ego, as a way to renunciate and move away from this materialism. And for quite a while I lived like that, and it manifested in ways that I couldn't even believe were possible. At first it felt like liberation. It felt like I was triumphing over this lower self, because it removed most of the mental blockages and the self-limiting beliefs about practices. One, it allowed me to go in there and hustle in the streets and not be ashamed whether or not people might judge me. Two, I found myself going to places where I wouldn't go as a Christian person. One of those places is I once had an experience whereby I went with my friends to a brothel, basically, to try and kill this ego, because the logic behind it was that if I could do that and maybe try to enjoy myself with such a lady, it would shock my ego enough and give me power over my consent, basically, monitoring my limits as to how far I can go with going against the normal. I did that, and many other things. But the whole point of this is that along the way, while pursuing this lifestyle of ego death, it manifested in self-loathing or self-hatred. You start to hate yourself, you start to hate how you look. Not consciously so, but unconsciously. And then you start to chastise materialism and you start to chastise money and condemn money and condemn materialistic living. And what happens when you do that? Automatically, when you have an aversion towards something, your spirit will work very hard to push it away from you. So you have an aversion against materialism, you push away materialism. Also, you push away the benefits of living and being able to support yourself. You find yourself in self-sabotaging patterns whereby even a simple job, you won't aspire to having one. A simple job. You start talking like these gurus that we see on YouTube and social media, telling us you can't be spiritual if you are working a 9 to 5. You can't be, and these success gurus telling us they dropped out of colleges and universities to be successful, and that we should find a way out of the system and out of the matrix. It creates such patterns. The underlying cause of all this is this self-loathing, this self-hatred that makes you act in such a way, that makes you speak about things in a certain way. You end up chastising a certain lifestyle, you end up chastising taking care of yourself, even the basic things in life, like having a shelter, having a house. That's how extreme it goes. You find aghoras in India renouncing or renouncing the material life. Some of them sell their houses, some of them sell their companies just to go in the forest. And going into the forest somehow makes them more spiritual. And wearing those rags makes them more spiritual. I don't know why spirituality is synonymous to poverty. All right, let's not speak only about the Indians because we want to balance this. In my country, South Africa, we have a spiritual system of it's a traditional spirituality, basically. We call it, when you are somebody who's such, we either call you a healer, ngaka, mupofeta, which is a prophet, moloi, which is a witch or a sorcerer. And then we have also what we call a sangoma, which can be a priestess diviner, which can be a traditional healer or a root worker. So basically, these people, when you see them going through initiation, they have to wear a certain hairstyle. Mostly it's dreadlocks. Those dreadlocks need to be drenched in a form of clay rock, reddish in color, similar to that of the Himba tribe. Yes, the Himba tribe that doesn't take a bath. You know the Himba tribe that doesn't take a bath. Google it if you are unsure. There's an African tribe which is called the Himba tribe. They don't bath. They just apply this red. It's red. It's red. It consists of some resins, you know. Yes, a certain form of rock, a clay form of thing. So it gives them that reddish color. They don't take a bath. Instead, they apply that thing. So you have to apply such things to initiate as a sangoma. You then also tie the cow's gall, you know, gall, like gallstones, gall. We call it gal in Afrikaans. Yeah, you have to tie it on your hair. You have to also basically renounce material life for quite a while, basically. Okay, detoxing from such um every once in a while, maybe like a sensory deprivation type of thing, where you're having spiritual retreats, it's enough to boost you and to re-energize and charge you back. But be careful because it will turn into self-loathing. So you find such people doing that and dressing in a certain way just to appeal to this idea of spirituality and poverty. Somehow, when you are like that, you are more powerful than somebody who is materialistic, maybe driving a car, maybe he has their own house, dressing up a certain way. Yes, somehow you become more spiritual than that. So today we will decode such facts, and I will show you something that made me realize how deep this can be and how destructive or detrimental this can be. So with this lifestyle of materialism, I don't like materialism, you start to isolate yourself from society and you start to practice spirituality. Obviously, when you do that, this is where you get your spiritual powers very quickly, of which I do have. I do have. Yes, I do have. But it's not on a scale of some of the advanced gurus, but I do have a level of spiritual power, which comes automatically as a result of practice. But isolating yourself and such helps you to get that power even much quicker and more. However, it's not a prerequisite to spirituality. All right. So I have this question. Well, I find this poster about spiritual research. And this is not why I actually cut my hair, because there's what? There's a chapter which talks about hair when you do dreadlocks basically, and how these lower evil entities can attach to your dreadlocks. It's not because of that. All right, let's continue. So we have this website that I come across, and then they show us these evil entities. So yes, guys, and I've seen some, not alive basically, but according to the portrayals or the portraits of what we are taught in Africa about demonic beings and zombies and stuff. All these creatures, they are hideous. They are hideous looking, okay? And then on this website also, there's a group of sorcerers, the Brahma Rakshasas, that died and are still roaming in the astral planes and in the subtle planes, in the lokas, the Patala Loka, seventh Patala Loka, and all that stuff. As you see these guys, these spiritual beings, they look very hideous. Okay, and then I had a question in my mind. What causes these beings to be hideous and to look hideous like this? Do they mortify themselves to look so hideous, or what? And then an answer came. It's not what they do by mortification that makes their external image to be like that. It's the internal universe, their mentality, and their practices. Remember, you can't fake energy, you can't lie to energy. Their internal energy is giving an external projection of such. So as a result, they look hideous, because you can't have an internal state which is beautiful and have an external state which is ugly. It's impossible. I'm here to tell you this, it's impossible. You understand? So even the ugliest people, not to body shame anybody, ugliest people are often cruel. If you are a guy, experiment this for yourself. Approach a very ugly lady, or just an average looking lady who's ugly, basically. Approach them and you'll see their treatment towards you. Um, they really ever, they tend to be overconfident. They tend to be loud and boisterous, simply because of their internal nature. They seek to look different or to stand out, so they tend to use these personalities, and they portray ugly behavior and rude behavior. So let's go back to polarity, and as above so below. So your higher self has its polar opposite, which is the lower self. Your higher self has its polar opposite, which is the lower self. The lower is lower in vibration, and the higher is higher in vibration. Then we attribute such poles to heaven and earth. In the heavenly realms, it's higher vibration. In the hellish realms, it's the lower vibration. But high and low are degrees of the same thing. It's the same pole, same vibration. All right. So then we come back to ourself. The self is even the self has two polar opposites, the higher and the lower self. But in the middle, what does it have in common? It's yourself. The physical body is a reflection of your subtle bodies. The physical body, being of its lowest nature, has its polar opposite, which is of a higher spiritual nature. Your spiritual self and your physical self are one thing, just different degrees. Your spiritual, which is your astral self, and the higher bodies, well, let's focus on the astral. The astral self is a duplication of your physical self. Your physical self is an extension of your spiritual self. Remember, the universe is largely comprised, or comprises largely of subtle spiritual matter. It's matter of a higher nature. And then the smallest part of the universe is actually the physical, or the tangible reality. Remember, the highest is subtle matter, the lowest is physical matter, or tangible matter. But it's the same thing. And thus is the case with your higher self. If you look ugly physically, you'll definitely be ugly spiritually. And this is a fact. And some of these lessons to learn very terribly so. Try to go maybe to an area where there's a lot of disabled people. I mean paraplegics. I mean your so-called cripples, basically, to be blunt. I just want you to get the idea. Go there and try to feel the energy around those people. It's very hard for one to be noble and of higher vibration while existing in such a body. One, why? You become bitter and envious of other people who are normal functioning human beings. And then you start to hate yourself as a result. And then your vibration gets lowered. So, what karma is it that you have to actually come back and be like that? It's definitely not good karma. But anyway, I'm not trying to judge right here. I'm trying to create a correlation and a reconciliation of the correspondences. Usually, when you are physically handicapped, you are also mentally handicapped. The people who are physically handicapped, I've never seen most of them exceed intellectually or mentally, because it is one and the same thing. Your physical body and your spiritual body is the same thing. So if you hate your ego, you automatically hate your spirit. If you hate your lower self, you automatically hate your higher self. And this will be reflected in the polar opposite not balancing. You will have one part which is ugly and the other part which is also ugly, and it don't balance. It causes an imbalance. If you take care of your spiritual body and neglect your physical body, you won't be gracious, you won't be attractive, you won't even embody spiritual energy. Your body is a temple, a representation of the highest manifestation, which is the universe and the Most High Jah. And I'm referring to saying the Most High Jah, I'm referring to the higher self, or whatever higher power that you want to name or attribute it to. So you can't hate your spiritual body and love your physical. You can't hate your physical body and love your spiritual body. It's impossible. There is no one without the other. It is not separate. For you to be complete as a spiritual being on this earth, you need to have the physical body and the spiritual body. They are a package. Time will come where you get generated or regenerated into the higher spheres. Let me give you even an example. You might go into the higher spheres, but if you hate your physical body, it will reflect even in the astral body. You won't glow, your aura will be ugly, you'll be one of those lower living entities. Let me show you an example. When you come across an ascended master, it's very rare that you find an ascended master who is ugly looking. All right, let's look at Buddha. Buddha looks very, very wonderful. They are clothed by the aura, even their vibration, it acts as clothes. The way they are so beautiful and appealing to the eye. Look at Zeus. Have you seen Zeus? The portrayal of Zeus looks very, very beautiful. And then look at the demons, the Goetic demons. Those guys look ugly. They look ugly. Where have you ever seen such a spirit maybe ruling over a higher plane like heaven? Or rather a higher plane like Bhuva Loka and the higher lokas? It's very rare that you find a realm of higher vibration being ruled by something so hideous like a demon. Let's go back to Jesus Christ. For those of you who believe in Jesus Christ, the portrayal of Jesus Christ and the saints, I've never seen any saints that look like those Agora guys. And there are Agora people that vibrate very higher. I mean sadhus that vibrate very high. Matter of fact, they are, but most of them, they vibrate very low. They vibrate very low. That's why the highest masters, they tell you to approach these sadhanas very cautiously. Don't go just to the cremation grounds and meditate on corpses. You need to know how to control that energy so that it doesn't mess you up. You understand? So that it doesn't mess you up. Mess up your glory, mess up your energy, and now you are vibrating very low. But most of the ascended masters in their portrayals, you see a very, very attractive looking person, a high vibrational person, or a deity, simply because of this fact. If you are ugly inside, it will manifest outside. If you do ugly sadhana, you get ugly physical body. You can't chastise the lower self or the ego and think you will appear to be a spiritual guru. So it is a time that we stand up. I'm not saying kill for materialism. I'm not saying lose your integrity for materialism. But I'm saying take care of your body, take care of this lower self, your ego, and love it, because it is a representation of the highest being the universe, and the highest spiritual being your higher self. With that being said, I'd like to conclude our lecture. Om Namah Shivaya, Mahayogi Asanist Fire, here on the channel Mahayogi on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed, please make sure that you do, and make sure that you like the video to make sure that future ones get recommended to you. Om Shanti.